So we're assuming that we have a flat tire. For this particular demonstration, mine does have a little bit of air in it. So all I'm going to do is, there's a little pin inside the valve here, and I'm just going to poke it with a sort of sharp corner on my tire lever here, and just try to let out as much of the air as I can. So now I'm at where you're at. Presumably, you have a flat tire, I have a flat tire. So what we're going to do is we're going to orient our wheel with the valve facing up, and this just gives us a starting point. Now the tire levers are included in your repair kit, and these are necessary to remove a tire. You can try to use something like a flathead screwdriver or other objects like a butter knife maybe. The issue with using those is that we can damage our rim. And if you bend or dent or create a burr on this metal rim, what will happen is that it's going to be something that can possibly poke a tube, give you another flat, and ultimately it can just ruin the rim. So we always avoid doing that. These are plastic. These will come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but the ones that we're giving you might be a little bit different. All the same, they have a hook on one end. Some of them might have a spot for you to grab one of the spokes with, which I'll demonstrate. Either way, what you're going to do is take both of them, and we're going to orient ourselves toward the valve. So each one is going to go on opposing sides of the valve. First, what I'm going to do is kind of push down and pull back a bit on the tire. And what I'm looking for is to grab the bead of the tire, which is this right here. Now I made it look easy, you might have to fish around a minute, but the point is that there's a metal wire that runs around the entire diameter of the tire on both sides. We're only working from one side right now, so as I've lifted the bead, I'm going to use that little spoke hook right there and leave that in place. So I'm going to repeat that process on the opposing side of the valve. I'm going to go in, hook the bead, and just push straight down. So now that I've done that, you can see that I have a piece of the bead removed. The last step, which is pretty straightforward, but sometimes it can be a bit finicky if the tire falls apart, if it wants to be sticky. What I'm going to do is leave the one in, and with the other, I'm simply just going to push forward and remove the bead of the tire all the way around. As I said, it can be a bit finicky, so depending on the tire, depending on the lever, it might be a bit of a more difficult process, but what we're looking for is to remove the bead of the tire on one side all the way, as we can see here. The second step is going to be to remove the tube and assess where or what is causing the hole. So to do that, what I'm going to do is put my fingers under the tire a bit, sort of pull it up like that. And what I'm going to do is fish in there with my hands, pull the valve out first, like this, and once the valve is out, all I can do is pull straight down, pull straight up, we took an outer tube. So at this point we're going to have half of the tire hanging on the wheel, the other half on, one half off, and this is the shelf that we're always going to work from. We're not going to remove the tire completely unless the tire is falling apart and you have to replace it. So at this point, whenever we're replacing a flat, whether it's during COVID or not, what we want to do is find out where our hole is. So as I said, this tube actually doesn't have a hole in it, but for demonstration purposes, I do have one that does. So let's assume that this is the one that I just pulled out of my wheel. What I'm going to do is grab a pump, and I think in the repair kits, you will have a hand pump, perhaps. The issue with a hand pump is that it doesn't necessarily have a gauge. You might have a heck of a time trying to pump it up. All the same, if you don't have one, this will do. And with most tires, you have a rating, a PSI rating, which I'll allude to in a minute. So what I'm going to do here is, this is my flat tube. I'm going to add some air to it and try to figure out if I can find the hole. So sometimes you can have a very small hole, which we call a pinhole leak. You can have a pinch flat, which is caused by low tire pressure. There's many different versions of holes in a tube that you can find. But the first thing we're going to want to find out is it on the inside diameter or is it on the outside, right? And so what I'm going to do, I actually have my finger on it. I know where this hole is. It's actually right by the valve. And my assumption is that it got poked when being installed, or perhaps it got shifted around a bit. But the point is, I found my hole. Sometimes you might put some air into it, it might swell up like an anaconda, and you'd be looking for a hole and you just can't find it. In that scenario, what you need to do is take your tube that has air in it and maybe take a bucket or your kitchen sink, anything that you're willing to dip this tube into, and fill it up with some water and just kind of move it through a shallow amount of water until you find bubbles. Once you found the bubbles, just keep your eye on where the bubbles are coming out of, keep your eye on the hole, and then we'll be moving on to the next part, which is actually patching the tube.